Hey, this is Ky Logue, and you're listening to the Real Estate Wholesaling Syndicate. I designed this podcast to get you real, actionable information that you can apply directly into your wholesaling business. There's no fluff, no bullshit, just real advice and real strategies from the best investors and wholesalers in the game. So today I'm super excited to have Henry Mims on the podcast with us today. Henry, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to be here. Heard a lot of great things. Hope to be a part of it now too.
Awesome, man. So just to get started, can you introduce yourself or for people who might not know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Henry Mims. I am a realtor here on the Space Coast, which is Brevard County in sunny Florida. I am deaf, so I'm also known as the deaf agent. If you look at me, look for me through social media, YouTube, or any of those other places. And basically, in being deaf, I had to learn how to communicate with the world that didn't know how to communicate with me. And that kind of sucked in the beginning, don't get me wrong. But what it did help me to do was to see things that people were telling me without saying it and be able to use that to help them.
Mm.
And that's kind of how led me to real estate in the path with wholesaling and stuff like that. And now I'm just kind of trying to shed light on communication and helping people understand each other, understand that profit isn't a bad word, and just kind of get on with the Joneses. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome, man. I love that. So how did you get started in real estate?
Well, back in the day, this is when I say back in the day, I mean the late 90s. I had a friend of mine, I was working at a restaurant, and I had a friend of mine who was a waiter, and he was telling me how he was about to close on a house. And I said, wait a minute, didn't you already close on a house about 3, 4 months ago? And he said, yeah, and I hope to close on a whole lot more because at that time I thought you just bought one house
Mm.
and that was it, right? So I said, so you own these houses? And he goes, no, I'm closing on them and I get paid for finding houses for people. That's how it's presented to me.
Hmm.
And I said, there's no way it can be that easy. And he goes, oh, it's not easy. But yes, that is what I do. And I said, all right. So I kind of shouted him a little bit. And then I thought, well, this is something I can do. And then the first thing I did was I started doing bandit signs, things like that. Um, and I realized that I wasn't getting much traction because people were calling me and I don't answer phones. I didn't put the two and two together, right? So I'm like, okay. So what I started doing was I started looking for houses that looked like crap,
Mm.
or a house that was overgrown. Maybe the house looked good, but it was overgrown. And then I started, the difficulties in communication at that time. I'm 45 now. But at that time, it was so many different accents, so many different lips to read, so many, so many, so many. It was overwhelming for me. So what I did was some of the people he was working with, um, I kind of said, well, listen, can I just kind of piggyback off of you? And I'll find the houses if you can come with me and we can try to close the deals. Because what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to jump into a realm where I said yes to something that should have been a no, just because I misunderstood,
Mm.
right? And you know that a lot of times the expectations are set, but then because of the emotion that these people are unfortunately going through, it can be misunderstood, not your fault, not their fault, and then it escalates pretty quickly, sometimes. So yeah, that's how I kind of got started. I dabbled in and out of it because one thing that a lot of people don't know, and I kind of found out after I got in, is I hit the ground running. And then I started making money. And then it just started being way too much real quick.
Mm.
Because I'm not saying that I'm super empathetic or sympathetic, but after a while you start hearing these people's stories and you start seeing the ugly and the families and the fights and all this stuff. And for me, it just became too much. So I had to, instead of hitting the ground running and going with it, I just kind of dipped in and out of it whenever to find my peace again and just kind of go with that while maintaining a job as well. So that's how I got started.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you for sharing. That's definitely crazy, man, 'cause that's like challenges that you've had to face that most people don't even think of. And there's already so many challenges, and then you have deal with the communication issues. So
Hmm.
one thing you said, so you got really good at that I picked up on. You said you got really good at learning what people were saying with, but not by what they were saying. So is it more like picking up on nonverbal cues?
100%. And not only that is I can read lips. So a lot of times the families would go and try to walk off and like to another room or something, or an elderly man or whatever it is. And the hardest thing, and I think I know you can relate on this, but the hardest thing for me and the people I was working with was trying to find out what the real cause is.
Mm.
What is the real issue here? Right? Because people aren't like, for example, when people buy a car, it's not, I mean, the car, yeah, but when you're younger, what does it represent? It represents freedom. So you're not trying to buy a car, you're trying to buy freedom. So what is it that they're really trying to get out of this? Because a lot of times, as you know, when you go, they hold their cards very close to their chest.
Mm.
And you could actually have a solution they're not going to tell you anything about to be able to solve because they're so focused on the money. So when they were off in the distance, I'd read their lips or I'd watch their body language. Were they interested? Were they attentive? Were they, dismissive? If they were dismissive and what the investor was saying was true, then I had to try and kind of bridge the gap there to be like, hey, wait a minute, this is why. Because truth be told, if someone is confused, the answer is going to be no. That's just the bottom line. So when I see that no in body language, or I see that no with the eyes, or the way a couple looks at each other, or whatever it is, it kind of helps me to say, wait a minute. So this is why what happened, and then I let them continue, let the experts continue. And so yeah, that's kind of what I did. And the reading lips, brother, when I was a lot younger, people used to invite me to parties, especially my friends, because they would try to go hit on other girls. And when they would go try to hit on other girls, I'd watch their lips to see what they said to their friends, to let my boys know, hey, you should go back over there. Nah, I wouldn't do it anymore. But yeah, reading lips and the body language go hand in hand, absolutely.
That's awesome. So have you always been deaf?
Well, when I was 8 months old, I had meningitis. And then they put me into a coma just to try and get my body to rest so I could focus on fighting the infection, right? But they didn't know that I was deaf until I was 3. So in that time period, what had happened was I started becoming very aggressive with my mother, and I got along great with my father, and I had a lot of frustrations. Like your parents put you in front of a TV to watch PBS and all this other stuff. Well, when you're that young, what do you watch? Muppets and cartoons. I was getting so frustrated because I couldn't understand any of it. I broke a TV.
Mm.
And in breaking my TV, and then my aggression towards my mom, they said, well, I think he had a behavioral problem. So they took me to a doctor, and the doctor said, no, I don't think he had a behavioral problem. His son's deaf. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. And then that's kind of where it went on. So I could hear until I was 8 months. And then they found out I was deaf at 3.
Wow.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. It's
It
a, it's
is.
a, it's a different world. It is.
Yeah, you'd think someone would have picked up on it, but I guess when you're that young, I guess it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Especially when I could understand my dad perfectly well.
Hmm.
And it's because his voice was very deep. So my deafness, most of it is the high pitches. I can't hear anything like whistles, anything like that. I can't hear at all. I can feel it, but I can't hear it. And the deep, I can hear and feel. That's why I love music with bass, especially funk and blues and stuff like that. The bass and the drums, I pick up on it all day long. I don't even know what the singer's saying, but I'm like, yeah, I like this band. So yeah, same thing.
I love that. So I know one time I made a social media post, and I think you commented on it about Mr. Beast doing you know paying to have the people that are deaf fixing their hearing, and I think you made a comment saying that you understood it, you didn't understand why people were hating on him, but you said you wouldn't you wouldn't want to. I forget exactly what you said, um,
Yeah,
but you wouldn't want it
there's no
basically.
right. There's no way, and I couldn't. One of the things that I always fall back to when I hear those things is I can understand the good intentions, and I can also understand people who would want to do it. And it's just a difference of opinion. There's no love lost there, as far as me judging or anything. But there's a movie, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but Val Kilmer is in it. And in the movie, he's blind, and he gets his sight restored, and his life falls apart
Hmm.
because now he's lived a world where for 40 something years, he's lived the life of a blind man. And now he's walking through windows, and it's horrible, right? So from I've known this world for 40, 45 years, music, and I'll give you an example. One of my biggest fears in gaining my hearing And I know this may sound stupid to you, but to me, it's prevalent. I am always listening to music, always. If you come in my house, there's something playing somewhere. If you're in my car, there's something playing. I am one of those guys that will travel 4 hours just to see a show. And I'll go to the show and I'll take my hearing aid off. Well, how much of my love for music would I lose if I gained all my hearing?
Mm.
The other thing is when I come home, I can shut everything off. I am deaf and there's a lot that I know that I miss out on. But as selfish as it may sound, I love being able to control when I can and can't hear. So, like my wife, for example, she'll get annoyed with me because when the kids start getting rambunctious in here, I've got 4 boys. And I have a daughter, but she doesn't live with me, but the 4 boys do. So when they start getting rambunctious and wrestling and all this other stuff, and she's like, "Oh my God, these kids won't stop." My hearing aid's already out, so it's not bothering me. I'm like, not doing this, you know. But it's the life I've known, and I've kind of gotten on with it pretty well. I wouldn't change it at all. I wouldn't change it at all.
That's great, man. I love that perspective. So, what are some things that people can do to get better at, understanding nonverbal cues or maybe learning how to lip read? Is that something anybody can learn, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that people can learn. One of the biggest things that I see being let's just social settings. Okay. One of the biggest things that I see people misread is they think that everybody, you know how like when you go to a conference or you go to a party or there's somebody's having a 4th of July, whatever it is, right? And you see two people standing like this to each other, you don't interrupt. I see so many times people just walk up into the middle of it. There's no invitation there. But if the two people are standing like this, that means they're open to somebody else coming in.
Mm.
Don't come in, come in. And I wish people could see this with the hands, but basically I'm saying if two people are standing facing each other, then don't walk up. Well, at least just say hi and then just move along. If two people are standing diagonal to each other, I guess would be the best way to put it. That's an invitation that they're open to somebody else coming. Um, Another thing is the head tilts and the there's a lot of passive aggressive in that. And usually in the passive aggressive is either somebody hiding something as far as I don't want to say hiding because that sounds kind of like uh, they are trying to be very careful about what they say and control the situation in a weird way. But yeah, there's a lot of things. The main thing though is to understand. It's one of the things I deal with a lot as a real estate agent, as a wholesaler, and whatnot. Is when once you understand that people aren't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time, and then you take it from that point. The verbal cues don't matter nearly as much as the physical ones. A lot of times, I don't know if how often do you go and sit in front of the people you're trying to wholesale from or trying
Yeah.
to get?
Almost never. I try to do everything over the phone.
Okay. See, that's something I don't have. So yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so when they're sitting down slouched, for example, they could feel defeated.
Mm.
They could feel um either defeated or like they want you to go away because it's just kind of like they're done, they're shut off. If you take that time to explain how it can benefit them and come to a solution, you'll start to see them sit up more. You'll start to see them put the arms on the chairs, like on the arms of the chairs, and stuff like that a little bit more. For lack of a better, that's about the best I can do as far as without physically being able to show.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
since you mentioned that your audience is mostly deaf, we'll use the video content
Okay.
so they can watch it too.
All right. Beautiful. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course.
That
Yeah.
would be awesome. And then we can close caption. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be awesome.
for sure. Yeah, definitely. I want to make sure everybody can listen to this. So yeah, I think it's going great. So you kind of you walked us through the story. You had the friend that was in real
Yep.
estate, and then so he started to go on the meetings with you.
Yeah. But I used to go and shadow him.
Hmm.
And then and it's a pretty cool thing. It's almost like you meet one person and then you meet another, and then all of a sudden you find out that there's this little group that's been living in your city that you didn't even know anything about.
Mm.
And then those people you just kind of sit around and you hear the coffee talks, the little things. And a lot of the time that he was doing deals, I wasn't there with him because I was working shifts, he was working shifts, whatever it was. And then you just kind of gravitate from that. Now, they did meet up, but we didn't have, like, for example, right now I'm part of a Space Coast Investors group. Um, it's a mastermind group. We didn't have one of those at that time.
Mm.
The group I have now, we're 30 to 40 plus, but that group, it was just 5 or 6 people. The thing that I had to watch out for that I did learn real quickly because we were in Pensacola was whenever we would meet up, there were a lot of people that it was transient. So a lot of people would come and go. So you had to be very careful who you partnered with because you can have agreements and all that stuff, but once they're gone, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm.
And oftentimes it'll cost you more trying to track them and get them and get your stuff than it would to just let it be. You know what I mean?
Mm. That
No.
makes sense. So how long did it take to get your first deal? And can you walk us through that deal?
Okay, so the first deal that I got was it was an overgrown property. And all I did was I just simply walked up to it and I said, hey, I'm kind of new at this, but I noticed that the grass is overgrown and stuff. And the way I pitched it was if he needed someone to mow his lawn, if he needed whatever, just try to find out where he was at.
Mm.
And the guy was just very disconnected and he was just like, I don't even care, man. And I was like, okay, so then I knew that he obviously does not care about what he's in, whatever. So I was kind of like, okay, I went to work and I talked to him and I said, hey, listen, one of your investors, if you could bring him along, because I don't know what I'm doing. I just really don't. And I shadowed, but I still, once you're in it by yourself, it's a whole different ballgame because now it's go time. So he said, yeah, no problem. So one of the investors came along and then they kind of talked. And one of the things I was really, really grateful for was and it kind of set the precedent from then on. Okay. So he was one of those investors that he did not care so much about. He wanted to make his money, no mistake about that. But he was really flexible in how he could make a deal happen and the willingness to make them happen. For example, like in this particular one, the guy had lost his wife. He didn't really see a much of a need. You walked into his house, it was a house of despair, you know. Um, but it was almost one of those kind of you got the feeling that the guy was not going to stick around for much longer you
Mm.
know? And it's a sad situation, it really is. But um, so the guy that I was working with, and he said, well, look, this is what we can do. We can do one of three things. Okay. I can buy this house from you outright, right? And then you can live in it and rent it for me because I like to buy and hold, right? And you can live in it as long as you want, so long as you pay the rent. Okay. I can buy it from you and you can get 2 to 3 months, whatever it is, and then you can just go and do whatever it is you need to do. Okay. I forgot what the third one was, but the guy chose to stay there for 3 or 4 months and then head out.
Mm.
And I have the feeling he just went on a kind of like a goodbye tour to do all the things he ever wanted to do. Never heard from him again. Um, but at that time, I did not know how to go to title. I did not know how any of that stuff. Because the only thing I'd ever sat in was him going to a house and talking to people that had called him. Because you have to look at the property. The other thing was, and I think really how do you say it really overwhelms new wholesalers is that when they go in and they look at the property, they don't know how to gauge it. They don't know how much of the cost to replace this whole kitchen, how much they don't know any of this stuff, right? So then what happens? They freeze and then they get the wrong numbers, they get all these things. So luckily for me, he came along, the deal ended up happening. I got about 3 or 4 thousand on that for finding it. And then he ended up buying it and holding it after the gentleman left. And that was my first deal. And I kind of kept it that way on almost every deal I've ever done since.
That's awesome. I love how you didn't make excuses.
No,
I feel like, you found a way, you can make calls or, you found something wasn't working and you just pivoted. So you were just going
yeah,
and just knocking on doors.
yeah, that's what I only went and knocked on doors that I saw were somewhat distressed.
Right.
Keep in mind at that time, I didn't know what probate was. I didn't know what pre-foreclosure was. I didn't know what any of this stuff was. And if I figured that if I knocked on 100 doors that looked like there was some chaos going on, that if I just got one or two, then that would fund me to be able to go to the festivals I wanted to go to. That was my mind frame at the time. It wasn't let me take care of a family like I have now. It was I can use this money to go party. I can use this money to go across the country to some festival. or a music show or whatever. But that was my motivation. I see the distressed properties and I just put the two together and said, okay, this is what I want to do. And I just kept knocking on the doors. Most of the people were very rude, did not care for me. Some were insulted at that I would think that there was something so wrong with them that they would let their property go. And I said, well, everybody falls into different seasons, you know? I mean, just and I come from a very Christian background, so
Mhm.
a lot of that seasons, the trees, the leaves, all that stuff falls in with me. And no judgment, but yeah, a lot of people were pissed off. They were like, "What are you doing in my house? Get off my lawn?" You know, just that's the way. You know, just as well as I do. You get the hang up and the why are you calling me? And yeah, so yeah, so that's what I did.
I love that. How many doors do you think you knocked before you got that first one?
Oh, maybe 50 or 60.
Hmm.
50. It wasn't my first one. It wasn't by any. I remember and it's funny because I remember several times going, yeah, I'm not gonna do this. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I've had a dog run up on me at that time. I had like all these things, and I was just kind of like, is it worth the? I don't know. Is you know, all these. What am I doing? Like, and then I started feeling. And one of the things that I had to get over was then I started feeling bad because then the people you know that would talk to that would get upset with you are like, you know, my dad's dying of cancer. Don't you have anything better to do? And you're like, oh man, I didn't mean to. Yeah, you just woke him up. He hadn't had to. I'm like, oh man, that's not what I you know, and you start feeling bad and all these things. But as time went on, I started to realize more and more that this is a story they're selling me to protect themselves because they're thinking I'm coming to hurt them,
Mm,
you know? And I'm not, I just want everybody to be okay, right? Not everybody's going to understand that. But yeah, that's why 30, 40, 50, I was going to quit 2 or 3 times. I got to about 50, 60. And that's about right around with my first deal.
I love that, man. That's great. Yeah, way to be persistent and just keep going. I mean,
Yeah, you have to.
hmm
It's not for the weak. It really is not.
no, it definitely isn't. Lots of ups and downs.
Yeah, yes, it does.
I love that,
Don't
man.
get, and the other thing is, you know, and I always try to tell people that are going into wholesaling, I have been screwed by the investors.
Hmm.
I have been one little line that I did not read, and I was kind of like, seriously, you know, and I know, whatever. I got a lawyer after that. I was like, I'm done. Lawyers can take care of it. They can write it. They can do whatever. Um, but overall, I can't really complain because it also opened me up and into a lot of other things.
Mm.
So it's just, yeah, you gotta be persistent. No fear.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing I've noticed, it seems like you're really good. I feel like a lot of people miss. They take everything at face value, or they don't realize that there's a reason people are saying what they're saying, or sometimes they're
Yeah.
being guarded, or they're holding their cards close to their chest, so to speak. Do you think that comes back to the nonverbal and cues?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you pick that up.
One of the biggest giveaways is when I would knock on a door and somebody would get mad at me and they're looking off to the side.
Mm,
Why? Because someone is sitting off in the living room watching them and they're trying to make sure that they're the big gun. Or they're trying to make sure that the person who really owns the house hears them talking instead of the owner talking.
mm,
You start to navigate who is really the owner, who's not. Who like and then or the little slip ups that they do, like for example when they're talking and then and then you'll see the eye twitch or you'll see the lip turn over here or you'll see like a in the neck and I'm like okay and then I follow that and I'm like all right so what are we not hearing here so then I start asking the question to find out what we're not hearing you know yeah verbal for me anyways for me I know you knock it out of the park though with your phone calls. I don't know how many times I've watched your phone call. And I'm like, this guy is just sick. Like he just, okay, next one. Okay, next one. Okay, next one. So you're saying if I could, you would? Like the other day, you put the call on that where the guy didn't know that you were still on the phone.
hmm
And I was like, this guy, I'll take 65, but he offered 75. And it was just like, okay.
That's the funny. Yeah,
Yeah, so I do that in a physical way. But yeah,
right.
go ahead.
That's great. I said, yeah, I actually talked to that guy again today. So we're still working on that deal. I think we're going to do a seller finance deal.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, it was a funny one. Yeah, he actually
Yeah, that
called.
was a funny one.
He called me back and he butt dialed me, And he didn't know he was talking to his wife the whole time. And I'm like, hello. And he couldn't, yeah, he wasn't there.
Oh, that's a gem right there.
Yeah, no, it was funny. So where do you think your persistence comes from and your motivation to just keep going? Because I feel like a lot of people struggle with that.
Well, it comes from my mom and dad, to be honest with you. My mom came from Cuba. Fidel Castro took over, and then they killed Camilo, and Che Guevara said, "I'm out." And they said, "We're out." So they came over here, and my mom, even when I was young, as young as could be, and she would remind me, I came over here knowing no English, got put in school immediately. Your grandfather came from Cuba over here, legally, of course, and it came over here. They did not recognize his accounting degree. He had a master's in accounting. When he came over here, they didn't recognize it, so he went and did it again, not knowing English to begin with. So she's like, I don't want to hear your excuses. I really don't. And so that just caused me to have to get after it, because my parents didn't give me excuses, which means I could not, I don't want to say fail, but I couldn't come back with, oh, it's just too hard. But
Mm,
how was I going to say that to her? You know what I mean?
right.
So, and then my dad put me, whenever I wanted to be in a sport or anything, put me in it. Whether
Mm,
I failed or not, he just put me in it. I was a champion BMXer. I played football, I played soccer, I played all that stuff. And I just kept going. And that was the other thing, was with sports, it taught me to keep going. The
mm,
drive, I don't know how many times BMXing that I was behind, but because I practiced so much, my stamina kicked in. So at the last, like maybe 20, 30 yards, I would pass and I would win the event. But if I had just given up, I wouldn't have. And then I also got no slack. So the excuses and stuff, that just went out the window. So I heard somebody say recently, just to paraphrase, they were on a TEDx talk, and I can't remember her name, forgive me. But she said she always thinks to herself, if I don't win, who loses?
mm.
You know? So I wish I had come up with that, but I didn't. But to paraphrase it, that's how my whole life has been. And my thoughts is, if I don't win, who loses? Now, I did get in trouble when I was younger. There's a lot of things that went into that, but just for the persistence and stuff, that's kind of where I go.
Yeah, that's great. So what, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of trouble were you getting into?
Well, when my dad died, I was 14, and we were living in the projects. And then my mom was working at Subway on top of her job at the state. So then we got a life insurance policy. We moved into where the other half lived.
Mm,
And now keep in mind, I was in the projects, and then went to a high school that was predominantly in the sticks.
hmm.
So the disconnect between the projects and the people that live in the sticks all clashed at the school. So everybody looked at me like, "Who are you?" Because whatever. But and then I just kind of started hanging around with people. I had a lot of rage,
Mm,
and in that rage, I let that rage led to apathy, and that apathy led to just, I'm just gonna do whatever I want, whenever, don't care, YOLO. It got to the point where I wasn't expecting to live into my 20s. I was like, something's gonna happen to me. I don't care. And I don't think people understand how, like, I don't care some people get to. Like, they
hmm.
literally do not care. And then I just started running with a bad crowd. I was facing 30 to 42 years. Some stuff had happened, and, uh, and that also involved fighting police officers, which don't do. If you ever, I mean, even if you're right, don't do it. But yeah, it just kind of led to one thing after another. Then the drugs came. And that's, I was kind of out of real estate for that whole period because I was just kind of in my own world. But yeah, it was a wake up call for sure. And then I kind of got myself straightened out right before my daughter. Yeah, right around before my daughter.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, my story is pretty similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I bounced around a lot as a kid. I think I went to like 8 different high schools, so definitely know what that
Okay.
feels like, and definitely know the just being angry at the world and not giving a fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what that's like, brother. I know what
Mm.
that's like.
So what you said it was your daughter the turning point? Was there anything else? What was the turning point for you?
Well, I had, for a long time, I felt like I was in a world that I didn't belong in. It was almost kind of like, okay, so, and I know I'm a Christian, but just try to think of it this way. I felt like I was in some kind of, I guess for a better lack of a better term, I was in some kind of galactic portal, and I jumped through the wrong door,
Mm.
and I just never felt like I belonged. My mom and my dad were great, and I had friends, and everybody saw me smiles and everything, but behind the scenes, there was no smiles, right? And as angry as I was, most people didn't know it. Um, and there's a lot of pretending that goes on, right? Just to make sure that everybody else is okay, because you don't want to be the cause of them not being okay, right?
Mm.
And then I decided that I was just gonna leave the earth one day. So I wrote my brother a letter, I wrote my mom a letter, and I went to the beach. And my plan was I was just gonna walk off into the ocean, and that was gonna be it. Then weird, I was sitting on the beach, everything out, ready to go in. And I was apologizing to God, and I was like, "Look, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I feel like I'm in the wrong place." I wasn't depressed that I was saddened by everything. I don't even know how to explain it. But and then it was almost as if I can remember this man walking up. We started talking. Everything was, it was just kind of like a peaceful sentiment.
Mm.
And then I started, I get my stuff and I go home. Well, on my way home, I pulled over because then I realized this man's lips never moved. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So then I started doing the whole thing. Was I going crazy? Like, was this God, or was this, like, what was that? Psychosis? What was it? Didn't know. And I was just kind of like, you know what, it was meant to be. So I got home, I grabbed all my stuff, and then 6 months later, I found out about my daughter.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't with the mom when my daughter was born. We had gone our separate ways, and then surprise, you have a daughter. And then when I found out about my daughter, my purpose changed. Because when you're by yourself, it's me, and not for anything wrong. It's just you. But when you have a kid involved, and it's kind of like ugh, I gotta do the best I can. So that's how that turning point came. I started having purpose. I started having the direction of my life started changing with the people, especially that I was involved with. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Of course, I got all the thought you were my boys, ride or die, this whole deal. And I'm like, yeah, I am ride or die, but I'm just ride or die for a different person now.
Mm.
And if you can't understand that, I apologize. But I'm still friends with a couple of them that we've all kind of gone the straight and narrow. But that's a kind of a short story of how it pivoted. And ever since then, you never know what's going to come in the future, right? I mean, you never do. So, but
That's
I'm thankful. I really am.
Well, thank you for sharing, man. That's a powerful testimony. And
Mm,
man, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's really going to resonate with some people. I know it did with me.
yeah, yeah. I'm always blessed, and I used to question that all the time that day on the beach. And then one of my buddies was like, it happened, whether it was real or not, it changed you.
Mm.
It's kind of like, yeah, that is what matters. So yeah, I kind of carry that with me. I'm
Yeah,
blessed. I really am. I really am.
100%, brother. Yeah, that's it's crazy. I'm seeing a lot of similarities between our stories. Because I tried to do the same thing, and the gun jammed, and I heard a voice in my head. And looking back, I didn't know at the time, but yeah, I definitely felt like it was God. So, man, life's
Uh,
crazy.
Amen. Amen. The-
But awesome, bro. So you had your daughter, and then so did you get back into when did you get back into real estate?
Probably about a year later. And then I decided, and then okay, so around this time, so you're looking at 2002, 2003, right? The dot com bubble had just happened. And then the markets were starting to come back up, right? Because everything had gone downhill. People were trying to bail. That whole thing happened. And it was a lot harder to find the deals because everybody else was already jumping because they already heard all the stories and on the news and all this other stuff about people getting these homes at these discounts, right? So it became a whole lot harder. Still doable though, but a lot harder because now you had more people in the game. Before there wasn't that many people because they just thought other people did it. But now when the news starts happening and all this stuff started happening, a lot more people got into the game. And then I got into it. I did a few more deals, and then probably 2003-ish, I decided that I was going to go to school for culinary. And then I just kind of started backing up. I would do 1 to 2 deals a year, roughly. Kind of something that I already had that I could do stuff. Again, it was my daughter. If I didn't have my daughter, then it was the festivals and the shows, right? All my bills were paid and all that other stuff. So that's when I started getting back into it off and on, going into 2007, 2008. I moved down to Orlando, 2004, 2005, and then finished out, started getting a job. Now I started making money because I was working at a restaurant and I drive. Money comes in like water, you know.
Mm.
Especially at that time, it was everybody was going left and right. That was at the time. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32 or 30,
Okay,
32 next week.
okay. Well, happy birthday.
Thank
So
you.
I'm the first one to say it.
Yeah.
So at that time, it was such a bizarre thing to see that here I am trying to get deals, bandit signs. At that time, I was using email instead of trying to do the phone number thing, just to try to make it. And of course, the texting. But the texting costs money, and a lot of people don't realize how much money goes into wholesaling. So you
Mm.
have to manage that. You can run dry real quick. So but then it was just kind of for me, it started to get real hard because in the Orlando area, I don't know about everywhere else, but in the Orlando area for the most part, I was finding people working at Taco Bell getting $200,000 loans. And I'm like, what? So then what can I bring to the table that these people are coming and crashing and getting all these and hyperinflation? And I know that, and then I started realizing, wait a minute, I know that this house is going to take $40,000 to fix. There is no way that I can get 70 to 80% for my investors and what they're looking for after there's no way I can do this.
Mm.
So that was a hard place to be. And then I just kind of I then the 2008, 2009 happened. And then after that, I kind of laid off because I got burned quite a few times in that time frame just because people were coming in, friend introduces you to them, they don't really know them, but they overshoot their worth, overshoot who they are, just because they're blown away. A lot of times what happens with gurus, you see a guru, all of a sudden you drink all the Kool-Aid they have for you. And it was just one, and I was just kind of like, that time I said, I'm done. I'm out. I got screwed. I made money, but barely, just
Mhm.
because of everything I had to pay. And then you lose your escrow, and then, I mean, all this stuff, right? And it was one of those things that I had to remember. It was also one of the only times when I did not have investors coming with me for the deals. Because I'd already done enough that's under your belt. So now I can kind of navigate the deals on my own. And I was like, nope. Ever since then, still back to investor with me for nothing.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of what happened in and out. But 2007, 2008, 2009, such a weird place to be.
Mm.
Probably the weirdest place in real estate I've ever been. And I think as a result of that, I don't care what comes in the next 20, 30 years. It's just going to be like the arm is already there. Like, let's go, you know? It's such a weird place. I wish you'd gotten to experience it at the level I did because it was
Mm.
definitely a learning lesson.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I know the people from it seems the general consensus, the people that stuck through it and kept going, they came out the other side stronger.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's either a blessing or a lesson. That's it.
Mm.
Yeah, 100%, brother. 100%.
Awesome, man. So, what's your primary way to get deals now? Is it still door knocking?
Right now, my primary way is I on social media.
Mm.
So what I do now is I do a lot of EMD money. I do a lot of I'll put in a little bit into different properties,
Hmm.
and I work with wholesalers now, and I know what to expect. And this is one of the other things that I think that everybody who wants to be into real estate and flipping, buying, holds, whatever it is, needs to take the time to be wholesale.
Mm.
Because once you start to understand that part, then you start to understand how the deals break down, and it costs you the least amount of money. For example, I get a deal, try to assign, right? I could still lose that money if I don't pay my cards right. I could still lose that money, but it's a lot easier to lose 3 to 5 thousand than it is 150.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because then what happens if you try to put the money into the house and then it doesn't appraise? You can't refi. You're trying to flip. It's just not going to work. You just have to eat that money. It gets really tricky. So right now, that's what I'm doing. And I'm helping I'm a realtor here on the
Mm.
Space Coast. And I work with investors. I work with wholesalers. Right now, I'm looking into getting into manufactured homes. stuff like that. I'm kind of bird dogging that and trying to see and pass it off to the wholesalers so that way they. But then if the wholesaler for a property that I don't want to be a part of, I mean, so not everything is something that you want to be. I like to narrow it down to one or two things.
Mm.
I like multifamily, you know, and I like, especially here in Florida, with all these people that are coming down and living with their parents or the parents are living with them, and I like manufactured homes just because of the entry point, right? And a lot kind of offset it a little bit. But one of the things that I do look for, here's an example, and this is something that I heard recently, which kind of confirmed what I'd been thinking. You live in Florida, right?
No, I'm in San Antonio.
San Antonio, Texas. Okay. All right. So then it probably applies over there. So you have these manufactured home places, and I was just hearing about this again the other day. You have these manufactured home places, or these RV resorts, or whatever it is, and they have this lot fees, 500, 600, 1,000, depends on what it is, right? And then they turn around and they say, hey, we'll give you a year free. For the people, they buy the home, they sit there, they're a year free. Well, now they've become accustomed to a life without having to pay that lot rent.
Mm.
But when that lot rent comes due, then it's like, oh my goodness, so they try to bail because now the life they built, they can't afford on top of the lot rent. So then that manufactured home or whatever that they bought for 50, 60,000, they're trying to sell for 40 or 50 just to get out from underneath. But the rents on that you can still get for 12, 13, 14, $1,500. So if you find that house and then you say, hey, Mr. Investor, whoever it is, hey, if I assign this to you, this fee, I know some wholesalers try to do percentages. I don't. I like to just build it in where it makes sense for them to see the deal, pay me, and it still makes sense for them.
Mm.
Because then when you start getting the percentages, it just gets a little wonky sometimes. So that's what I like to try to do. But right now, that's what I'm doing, and I'm shifting my focus mainly. And again, it's almost like something that confirms your beliefs when you hear somebody else who's a master at it, something I haven't even achieved close to, talking about the same things that you've been looking for,
Mm.
right? And it's kind of like, okay, I know I'm on the right path here. Yeah. So
I love that,
did
man.
that answer your question? I hope it did.
It did. It did, definitely.
Okay.
Awesome. So,
Yes.
so what advice would you have, Henry, for someone that's just starting out that wants to get into wholesaling and they're kind of sitting on the fence?
My advice is number one, I would go to a meetup or something. Like here we have Space Coast Investors,
Hmm.
which you can find us on Facebook. We meet up once a month. We also have a dinner once a month on top of that. And go there and listen to people who would genuinely sit down with you and explain to you how they made their deals, and more importantly, what they're looking for and how to find them. A lot of people out there, I think, don't realize or don't pull the trigger, I should say, because they don't understand that there's people out there that generally do not have the time to go looking for deals.
Mm.
So they will tell you all the different ways that you can go find them, and then please go do that because if you find me something, I'd be willing to pay you because you just made me money.
Mm.
And I think that gets lost in the mix way too much because they assume who's not going to do it or who's going to do it. That's not your job. The job is to find out how to do it and then find the people that need it. That's it, right? Well, where are you going to find these people? Real estate meetups. So that's number one. Number two is I would really work on social media presence because how many times have you seen on Facebook anybody know a good realtor or somebody going through a divorce or anybody know a good assisted living facility? The mom's probably getting put in one. The like, oh, okay, start the conversation. That's what I would generally do is real estate meetups. Follow you, of course, because you just hit home runs left and right. Like you are so smooth with it. I could never do it. Like not like you. So, but the real estate meetups follow you. And the other thing is I know you have the masterminds and stuff.
Hmm.
Whenever anybody gets a chance to just go to those. One of the things that I also think people forget is that when you for people that are real, I'm not talking about the fake ones, I'm talking about the real ones. When you pay the money to go and see, shake hands, and talk, money buys time, right? So if I can pay the money and short my time a whole lot, do it. And people that are legitimate though, like legitimate. That's what I would do. That's it. That's the advice. And just don't give up, because again, if you don't win, who loses? Right?
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's what I would do.
Yeah, I love that saying. That's gonna stick with me. I haven't heard that
Yeah,
before you
I
said
really
that.
wish I remember who said it.
Yeah, Henry did.
uh,
I heard it from you first.
uh,
No, I think that's great advice. Yeah, no, I think I did all those things when I started out. And like you said, when I first started going to the meetups and like the RIAs and it was I was so surprised by how many people there were there's people that just had a bunch of money they wanted to put into a deal. There were people that
mhm.
needed deals. They literally they were all just were there to look, and they were there looking for people. They were there.
Yep.
And, if you tell them you're like an independent wholesaler, they love you.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. And it's and I think the main thing is that so many people assume
Hmm.
instead of just going out there and doing it. I mean, yeah, you're right. The meetups and everything else is spot on, 100%.
That's great, man. So Henry, where's the best way for people to connect with you on social or?
I am I am primarily because as far as a realtor is concerned, I
Mhm.
am primarily on Facebook because that's where my clients mostly are. Um, and that's why I've kind of built a following as well. So Facebook at the Deaf Agent, I'm Henry Mims, and you'll see I have a blue check mark. I can't
Mhm.
be the Deaf Agent on Facebook, or else I'll lose the blue check mark. But I've had people say, "Hey, did you reach out to me?" And turned around, somebody tried to copy my profile, so I'm just leaving that be.
Mhm.
But yeah, Henry Mims, the Deaf Agent on Facebook, the Deaf Agent on Instagram, the Deaf Agent on LinkedIn. You can also find me on YouTube as the Deaf Agent at the Deaf Agent. You're gonna hear the Deaf Agent so many times on this, but yeah, so that's where you can find me. I'm always open to communicating on chat, there's Facebook Messenger, what have you. I'm always open to it. I also have a website called thedeafagent.com,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So check it out, take a look. If anybody has any questions, I'm always willing to help. I'm always willing to help.
Awesome. Well, man, this was a great interview. Thank you again for your time and coming on today and sharing. And yeah, no, I got a bunch of good takeaways. I'm sure the audience did too. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
Final thoughts is just get at it. And that's all there is to it. If I had spent all that time planning before I decided to pull the trigger, I might still be planning. Now,
Mm.
planning is important, but you got to pull the trigger at some point, right? And the other thing is that not to take yourself too seriously, because if you do, it's gonna get old quick,
Yeah.
you know. So
Hmm.
have a little bit of fun with it, realizing that you're trying to genuinely help people. And once you get to that point, things are just gonna fall in place. They really are. They really are. I truly believe that.
I love that, man. Well, thank you again for coming on, Henry. We'll have to do this again.
Thank you so much. I love being here, and I appreciate you having me, brother.
Hey, this is Ky Logue. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I truly appreciate you. If you want more of this information and you want to see these actually recorded live, go ahead, join our Facebook group. It's the Real Estate Wholesaling Syndicate. It's right on Facebook. Google it, you'll find it. Type it on Facebook, you'll find it. I look forward to seeing you guys in there. We give a ton of free information in there, a bunch of free trainings, free courses. You get all the scripts, contracts, everything you need, A to Z, absolutely free. And I look forward to seeing you on the group.